And good morning to all. Good afternoon, actually. The position of agriculture within the agenda, I don't think it was to minimize the importance of agriculture, but just to give the opportunity to be short and sweet. Right, Capsec? Right. Okay, so the Ministry of Agriculture, like every other sector, agriculture suffered significantly, and Maria did happen, and from that, a rebuilding of a new agriculture is required. How can we characterize the effects of Maria on agriculture? We had severe soil erosion, organic matter and nutrient loss of arable lands required for production, loss of production, of which livestock and crop livestock, particularly our poultry sector, where we lost almost 95% of that production. And incidentally, Dominica had not imported eggs for over 47 years, and in the first time we had to import eggs. Our crop loss as well, loss of revenue and livelihoods, severe damage to the terrestrial and marine habitats, destruction of our reefs, destruction of our nature sites. If we were to try to quantify the impact of Maria, agriculture, and we refer to crop and livestock, suffered about $480 million, forestry about 149, fisheries 80, a total loss of about $709 million. If we were to quantify the other associated losses, I'm sure that would be much greater in terms of the loss and the impact to agriculture. Having suffered Maria, the ministry moved quickly into a recovery strategy. Some of our more important interventions were geared towards restoring food security for the population, restoration of livelihoods, restoration of the trails and access roads, ensuring food safety, reduction, of course, of our interest rates at the aid bank as a means to encourage reinvestment in the sector, and other collaboration with other agencies and the ministries. Some of the clearer interventions, clearing of feeder roads with support from the FAO, WFP, and the government of Dominica, of course. In the Layo Valley, the west coast area, and the southern parts of the island. Distribution of seeds to cover about 210 acres among 1,450 individuals. Equipment and tools to include fuel and ice to fishers, and that was particularly important from a livelihood perspective, but also from a food safety point of view, because as you know, fish is it's a good source of protein. However, if not handled properly, can have catastrophic effects on the persons consuming it. And of course, so we had to make these interventions to ensure the safe food safety as it relates to the fish catch. And of course, payment of the emergency grant of $7 million to full-time farmers and fishers, all provided by the World Bank. Our feeder road distribution, I just wanted to highlight that point, because we recognize that there was a lot of food in the ground in the more productive areas, in the Layo area, the West Coast areas, and in the south. So we got together, deployed our equipment, and went out to do some work in clearing these roads so that we could remove the food that was already in the ground and to bring it into the market so the population could have food for its consumption. And we saw that immediately after the storm, when we started to make the interventions with our partners. We started to see food being at the market. First it was in the streets of Roseau, but then into the Roseau market. So we can see the distribution from this slide in terms of the areas that we have concentrated on and continue to concentrate on as we work to make that food available to the population. Just to go back a little bit on memory lane and looking at the reconstruction that took place after Hurricane David, Hurricane David came, and there were some interventions that we made, and some lessons learned, or lessons that were learned, and that we need to follow. We saw the protection and enhancement of land use planning and production and zoning. These dovetailed into what happened then was institutional strengthening. So then we had to go out to our farming public, with sustainable systems in terms of mobilizing the farmers and using techniques that we brought to them so that they could protect their productions. The introduction of competitiveness as a means of their production systems. Of course, after Hurricane David, we went directly into what would be the banana industry, which sustained us for a number of years. The use of sustainable systems in the transfer of technology, that again was a very important component of the strategy in terms of coming from Hurricane David. As well, our capacity building. We recognized then that we needed to build capacity from an institutional point of view, and drawing from the experiences of our regional and international partners, and to introduce these technologies into our country so as to get us to move forward and to bring us to the stage where agriculture has taken that serious prominence even prior to Maria. In terms of building the critical component of resilient agriculture, just allow me a little bit to look at the phases of disaster risk management. So we look at prevention measures, adaptation, preparedness. Of course, Maria occurred there. Our response and our rehabilitation. If we look a little further at the disaster management cycle there, we see the prevention and preparedness as key interventions before the actual event occurs. And if we pay some focus to that in terms of building our resilience, we'll be in these areas, looking and focusing at these areas as we make the interventions for building our resilient agriculture. Some critical areas of prevention that we would like to highlight as the ministry is looking at hazard mapping, and we heard the PS of housing speak about the vulnerabilities. So we look at the hazard mapping not only for hurricanes, but we also look at droughts and floods. The vulnerabilities, the risk analysis and mapping for floods, landslides. ICT as a very important component of that prevention in terms of having information and managing information carefully, land use planning, and look at the infrastructure planning away from the actual hazards. What are some of the key interventions required? And looking at all the hazards that I have identified or have been identified, one of it is water management. We see water, having sustainable water system as a major intervention, having water and conserving the water so it can be used for agriculture. So we hear about rainwater harvesting, drip irrigation system, looking at drainage and irrigation, improving water productivity and drought management in selected watersheds. Agricultural research will be very important as we collaborate with research institutions and universities, the State College. We are blessed with fresh, clean water, and if we look at our dependence on fishing, for example, some of the research would take us into things like aquaculture, where we could produce fish out from the coastal area, making our food resilient, moving a bit away from, if your boats get damaged, you cannot get fish. But we could have fish produced within our communities on the land, and again, reducing the dependence on the fisheries, the marine sources. Also, aquaculture is very important as an integrated farming system, and of course reduces impact on the environment in terms of managing wastes, etc. The community as a major client in the whole process of building resilience, it's important that we integrate them into that program, and that integration would look in terms of providing information to them. So we would look at collecting information from the rural, from the regional and international sources, and to have that information given to the community so that interventions can be made at the community level, at the farm level, so as to reduce the impacts on these populations. Agromet data, being able to capture agromet information and have that information utilized from a farming perspective, from a planning perspective, and from the farming perspective, again, as a means of building resilience within the agricultural sector. The other area of importance is reducing landslides, and we can landslides and land slippages, which is very important, and that point that actually starts within the forest. And I heard some discussion on the forest and reforestation. That is going to be very critical as we go forward, as we try to protect the reefs, protect our marine space, and again having food available to us, and the vital tourism industry as well in terms of diving, etc. And so these interventions, we want to look at planting trees in selected areas, having the right species in the right areas, and looking at other land management interventions at the slope level to reduce that impact, reduce the slides, which ultimately impact water, impact the food production, and housing settlements below. A lot of mention has also been made about the watersheds, and we recognize as agriculture the importance of water. Water for agriculture, water for the consumption of the population. And we went into the watersheds and saw the destruction, the devastation in the watersheds. And we have started our work in terms of trying to protect these watersheds, recognizing the grave impact that has occurred on these watersheds. And we know that if we do not make the interventions that are required and make them in a very sustainable manner, the availability of water might become very challenging for us if we were to be faced by a dry period. The farmers are ultimately the producers. They are the ones who take all the risks. And the development of risk transfer mechanisms, be it at the farm level, looking at the investments that have been made, is very important, it's very critical in building resilience. So looking at insurance schemes, be it, as I said, from a farm level, looking at the structures, but also their financing, that in the event that there is a storm or some event, that they are able to bounce back quickly. I'm rushing along because the CAPSEC asked me to rush. In conclusion, the importance of capacity building, knowledge management, ICT, engineering, propagation, both from crop production, but looking at forest management, agribusiness, as we look to link our producers to markets, link them to sustainable markets, to building strategic coordination from a regional perspective, international perspective, and even from a local perspective. Collaboration within the sectors, collaboration with the Ministry of Tourism in terms of getting us back, because agriculture and tourism we are linked, and we have developed, strong ties in terms of moving our work forward. The area of institutional strengthening will be critical to achieve resilience in agriculture in terms of building, strengthening our extension services, and the service that will eventually and ultimately go out to the farming communities and the other stakeholders. I've come to the end of my presentation, but I would not like to leave without saying thank you to Mr. Stevenson, who has provided a lot of support to us in terms of preparation of this presentation and just looking at planning in a resilient manner, and Mr. Bully as well. Reggie Savre, they have come on board and really provided some support to us in terms of helping to push the agriculture sector. There's a lot more that I could say. I will save that for another occasion. And probably CAPSEC has assured me that I will get my own day, so I can do a larger presentation. So thank you once and for all to everyone.